Yes, that's right. This is Let's Talk Call-In Radio, and I'm joined in the studio today. I'm Paul Raffel, joined by Shelley Rugg and Charles Schultz.
Well, hello. Oh,
morning.
Hello. Indeed.
And it's been a bit hectic here because there are roadworks between Marshall and here, and also a semi has backed into a ditch at Bob Giacomini's ranch. So
sort it out.
The road is partially blocked. It took quite a while to get through.
Indeed.
The guy with the stop sign was really good at stopping traffic.
Indeed.
Anyway.
Well, let's see. This is Let's Talk, getting to the root causes of the important issues of the day. This on-air community forum believes your voice matters and welcomes all thoughts and views without judgment. Please join today's conversation by calling 415-663-8492 or tweet us at Let's Talk on KWMR. And what is the topic for today, Mr. Raffel?
Well, so I've been looking at this for a little while. Libertarianism. The Libertarian Party and the people, the American form of libertarianism.
Because that's a very important distinction you've just made.
Yes, and because libertarianism can be any political stripe, right?
Could be Murray Bookchin's municipal libertarianism, which actually I quite fancy or agree with.
Anarcho-syndicalist libertarianism, communist libertarianism.
European libertarians are very different from the way the word is used.
Left-wing libertarian, right-wing, and it's when did it all start? Back in... the Enlightenment.
Yes. Well, I think that you're talking about what used to be Western libertarianism, meaning the American West, and that was a whole strain within the Republican Party, I think, sort of typified by Barry Goldwater, and that was a whole thing, which was actually had lots of interesting elements in it. I've come on today to praise Barry Goldwater, but then it became a brand. It became a bit of marketing for the Republican Party, and then they got an actor to become president and ride around on horses, and so that was the 1980s, who was sort of presenting as a brand the idea of libertarianism and the freedom of the West and, whatever, the Ridge and St.
Rugged
Barbara.
Individualism.
Yeah, that thing. But, I mean, it comes out of a tradition that has lots of interesting things in it. I like to say to people that every socialist should be a libertarian and every libertarian should be a socialist. It's just a question of, what we do as a social or communal activity and what we retain as private activities. And I think that we like our privacy as Americans. I mean, we don't.
So certainly it's informed the Tea Party, and the Republican Party has glommed onto it, as you say, since Reagan.
Just marketing,
it's all about smaller government and fiscal conservatism and loosening regulations on everything. That people are smart enough to know not to do the bad things.
Well, that's Christian democracy.
The free market. Free market enterprise.
Christian democracy, the ideal of Christian democracy is still the Christian Democratic Party in Germany, was based on this idea that you wouldn't need government because Christian morality would govern, or would.
So what about the 21 national monuments that Trump is trying to get rid of, that designation? Now, is that something that a libertarian would be happy about?
Probably, because they're not getting rid of them. They're going to sell them to the highest bidder so they can, or rent them to the highest bidder so that they can extract minerals and oil, whatever, drilling in national parks and wildernesses.
So by taking away that protection, it is allowing a certain group of people to have access.
Right. Unfortunately, American libertarianism, and unfortunately in America in itself, in my opinion...
How dare you? Back to your country,
it believes that corporations are people. It treats them as people. So these multinational drilling oil companies, they're the ones who benefit from it. It's not about people having the freedom to go with a shovel and dig up dig up some
gold
iron ore or something. And libertarians are all also about you can do if you own a piece of property, you can do whatever the hell you like with it. It's yours, and that's property rights, and we don't mess with them. And
663-8492. Give us a call,
give
please.
Us a call.
Tell
Are
us
you
what
a
you feel.
libertarian? Maybe we've got it all wrong. I've only been reading about it for a couple of weeks, and I had a pretty dim view of libertarians because it's mostly about getting rid of regulations that have been some of which have been helping.
Well, on a personal level, it's your wealthy uncle that wants to sleep with prostitutes without the guilt factor. It's people who are already rich who would like there to be less constraints upon their wealth.
So here's the sort of mantra that a lot of libertarians, excuse me, not us and them. It's this is a discussion. We welcome your calls without judgment, and we just want to learn about libertarianism. So please do call in 415-663-8492. Here's this guy, Pawn Stars. Do we know what that is? It's some TV
it's a television show about pawning things.
Pawning? Okay.
Pawn shops.
Rick from the TV show Porn Star. I'm a total libertarian. I truly believe that if government just stepped out of the way, we'd have a trade surplus. We'd be energy independent. We would have full employment, and there'd be so much money out there that there would be charitable hospitals all over this country.
Ooh. So again, that Christian democratic thing that somehow.
Well, so there's like this intersection between this idea that we're going to take all the constraints away, but then that opens it up for big business to just take over.
Yeah, but I guess the theory is that you're not going to soil your own nest.
But
right?
It's not true, is it?
It's not true.
No. It's always somebody else's nest.
And, and it's, even though she, apparently Ayn Rand thought when she was called a libertarian, she got very upset and said, well, libertarians are just stealing what I said. And, but she, the idea of the highly moral corporate business owner who always does the right thing because he's morally superior. Obviously, he's morally superior because he's wealthy. Therefore, he was chosen to be the great one. He has all the right genes, and he can make the decisions that are the best for the country and
Trump.
for the people.
Oh, yes. Lovely.
Well, so and of course, Ayn Rand, the Atlas Shrugged, it's like the Bible for young Republicans.
Well, a huge in Silicon Valley, has to be said. Yeah. Very influential in Silicon Valley. Those folks down there actually believe that stuff.
Peter Thiel, one of them.
Well, at Wikipedia, Jimmy Wales, and his sort of explanation for what Wikipedia would be is that the true knowledge production would come out of a free marketplace. And so you'd get the best knowledge from just allowing everybody to add their little bit or edit this and edit that. But those are the ideas that come from Friedrich von Hayek, right? And he directly names him. And von Hayek is associated with lots of, this sort of libertarian strain. But I think it's a blonde beast thing. I think it's Nietzsche's master's morality, that these people want to have some moral justification for trampling the earth and taking what they want from other people and blah, blah, blah. But, I mean, we should point out that, West Marin lives off the largesse of this imperial economy.
And all those pension funds, all the...
I mean, the idea of liberty sounds good.
Of course. Founded this nation with the notion of liberty.
And I guess it's like any party, if you abuse the privileges that your party affords you.
Yeah.
So, and I'm coming here from a very naive, ignorant place. I really don't know a whole lot about the different parties. So what's the distinction between Republican and Libertarian? Because it sounds, from what I'm hearing,
well, these words,
it sounds like the Republicans are aligning with some of these same values.
Well, the thing is, it's just a brand. It's just a lifestyle brand, right? I mean, so what is actually happening, the government never shrunk. It didn't shrink under Reagan. It didn't shrink under any Republican president. And so it's just a way of... selling people, in the way that you think of like blow-dried Baptists selling swamp acres in Florida, right? I mean, these kind of fraudsters who are, as Paul says, just these giveaways to big business and people who are already rich, but you do it under a banner. You do it under this explanation, which we put the word libertarian on.
So there's a certain group that's going to be drawn towards that, and then another group drawn towards this. And is there a marriage between the Republican Party and the Libertarian Party?
Tea Party.
Well, but I'd say it's even worse than that. Because one, the Tea Partiers, a lot of them love Social Security, love Medicare, love Medicare, right? And they don't want those things taken away. I mean, there's a reason why but I would say that the Republican Party isn't even a party. I mean, that we give it this credibility by, labeling it a party. It's just, the public relations arm of a certain sector of heavy industry, mostly, mining and oil and defense and things like that. And the Democrats, also not really a party, is the PR arm of a different sector,
different set of wealthies, of bankers, and and it's a way for corporate governance, right? Which in itself is a libertarian idea. So, here's this was actually on Facebook. Bernie Stephan, one of the original co-hosts of this show. Thank you, Bernie. He said, "I used to think that maybe I was a libertarian, but I do want local governance at the village level. As an anti-theist, I don't need churches, and as an anti-hierarchist, I don't want centralized and standardized anything. Libertarians want severely limited government, and anarchists want none. Libertarians are to anarchists as nudists are to naked people. They're just middle class and organized, so they appear less crazy. An anarchist is an extreme libertarian, like a socialist is an extreme Democrat, and a fascist is an extreme Republican." There.
Oh, Bernie Stephan, thank you. Oh, we do have lovely Noam. He's very easy to contact on the internet. So
Garden Noam.
We're pen pals, yeah. Or e-pals, I don't know exactly. But I asked him because Murray Bookchin's libertarian municipalism, as he defines it in The Ecology of Freedom, has actually become this inspiration for the Kurds. Kurds, fighting ISIS, fighting the Turks, fighting Syria, trying to sort of maintain their survival. Their leader was a Marxist, a fellow Öcalan, who's dead now, was the leader of the PKK, the Kurdish Revolutionary Party. And in prison, he read Murray Bookchin's Ecology of Freedom, and he abandoned Marxism because he loved Bookchin's ideas, and he told all of his followers to read The Ecology of Freedom. I mean, Murray Bookchin, a friend of Mark and Donna Claveau of Tamales, that was their one attempt to introduce politics to West Marin back in the 70s. They got Murray Bookchin to come to the Farallones Institute, and the Farallones Institute is exactly what he just said about middle class people in the nude, whatever. I mean, it's but they tried to make it more credible by introducing politics to it, which obviously the lifestyle hippies did not want. I mean, they didn't want politics. But that was his view ultimately was a libertarian view because, as I say, you need the mixture of those two ideas. When you think of Shaw's Pygmalion, which many people might know as the musical My Fair Lady, it's a socialist critique of the family. It's about how family members exploit each other for economic reasons. And you need that kind of critique within your own family. I'm not asking anybody to hate their parents or something like that, although you probably should. But it was.
His mother just visited.
Oh no!
No, sorry, I wasn't on the mic, so,
so nobody heard. No, but so you should have that kind of understanding of people in the way in which we manipulate each other, and the way in which we try and control or dominate one another. Not to say that that's not wrapped up in love and other deeper feelings and things like that too. But the idea that the state should step in and direct the way people should relate to each other and direct the way families should be and tell you how to educate your children and tell you all these things, I agree that that's really creepy and weird. So it's not that you shouldn't have the critique, it's just that it has to be voluntaristic in a way. You have to be doing it.
That seems like a disconnect from the Republican Party because they seem to really want to control how we have education and how we have religion and all these things.
It's the dichotomy, right, of republicanism is to abhor big government, and yet, as Charles said, it never gets any smaller. In fact, they just keep, especially the military, and they always want to regulate what you do with your spare time and who you love and what you do in bed, and right.
And also, those heavy industries are hugely subsidized by the state, right? Even, I mean, that fellow, that rancher out, I guess it was in Nevada, that Cliven Bundy
up there in Malheur, where I was was for the eclipse.
They're getting to graze on government-owned land. He didn't pay the rent for 20 years.
Which is like $1 an acre.
Yeah, right. So he has this tiny little bill he has to pay to the government. He's massively enriched himself by being able to graze on it, but didn't want to pay for it.
Yeah.
And so
he's a libertarian.
Well, but I mean, the oil companies are the same way. The drilling leases that the government gives to offshore rigs in California, to all of the drilling that happens in public land,
fracking.
It's a tiny fraction. And of course, I mean, the defense industry is the greatest example of it, completely subsidized by taxpayer dollars. Mm-hmm. That is Lockheed Martin and keeping us free, and General Dynamics.
Then how come we don't feel free?
Well, freedom isn't free, and we're just not spending enough.
Well, I mean, the idea of local government, I mean, it's too much bother. I mean, certainly in a place like West Marin, I've been banging my head against that wall. I wish I could start banging my head against the actual people themselves. It's a huge commitment. So if you want to do things locally, for instance, Marshall has a septic system that was a community activity, but it was 2 years of weekly going to the county, going to the Civic Center here in Marin, and working all of that out, and it exhausts people. It's this huge,
and that was really a survival gambit because the houses along the bay are always in danger of being shut down, red tagged, and Anyway, we're getting into a different issue, but it was about the suspicion was that it was the leaky septic tanks that were hurting the oysters, and nobody would do a DNA test to check and see if it was actually cow poop. But so to forestall any kind of shutdown of taking red tagging all the houses along the bay. We put in a sewer system, and thank you, Paul Elmore and everyone
Grimes
else.
And all people. But it was this huge commitment, a kind of commitment. They say we're going to work on this one day a week of your life for 2 years, Shelley. You and I are going to go to the Civic Center. She's shaking her head.
That is a huge commitment.
It is a huge commitment. People just don't want to do it. So people say things like, "Oh, we want the village to be this, and we have actually they just sidestep it. It's our version of branding. Everything is a community. We're a community. This is a community. The community. Anyway, it's a fraud.
Speaking of communities, what got me interested really about this was this seasteading. Have you ever heard of seasteading?
No,
Patrick Friedman, Milton Friedman's grandson.
Milton Friedman's
he used to live in
grandson.
Carmett, which is in Sonoma County, so we can hate him.
He was a techie engineer. Patrick Friedman,
yeah.
So for Google, and also a good poker player. Apparently, he makes lots of money at poker. But his idea, he wrote a book with somebody called Joe Quirk. About seasteading, which is building floating cities.
Oh.
And the real idea for it, it's not a bad idea if you could actually live on the ocean. There's more ocean than there is land, and But the idea really was to form autonomous cities, autonomous government. You choose how you choose to be governed, what rules you have, what laws you have, and you're
so
outside.
It's like the new territory to
Exactly.
take over.
It's the new frontier, and
Are they planning on dumping the poop in the ocean?
Yes.
Well,
Because the ocean, it's just a big toilet, right?
Yes, that's what they don't actually answer those questions, but because these are techies and they think that technology is going to answer everything, they talk a lot about recycling the salt water that's used and desalinated salt water, but there is actually nothing here about what they do with the waste
Sanitation.
problem.
Yeah, okay.
But really, it's he's a libertarian, and they love the libertarian ideal of everyone gets to choose how they govern themselves. Not a bad thing.
It sounds good.
And it sounds good. Of course, putting something floating around in the ocean sounds easy. But as we know, it can get a little rough out there. So what they've recently done, just this month, was signed an agreement with French Polynesia.
Oh, boy.
French Polynesia is going to allow them to build their first floating city,
Village.
they're saying it, village, in one of their lagoons, in one of their beautiful lagoons.
Wow.
And part of the selling point is that this may be a way for atoll countries like the Marshall Islands or the Maldives to, this is a way that you could actually keep people where they were born, and except they'd be on a floating city within an atoll that's just under the water, all that sort of stuff. So there are good things about it.
No, I don't think
I can see. I mean, all the problems that are
Quickly, 663-8492. Give us a call. Tell us what you think about libertarianism. But I've reduced it to a phrase, a very old phrase, which is power without responsibility.
Yeah.
You want power and you want to do what you want, but you don't want to have any sense of being responsible to other people.
Right.
And so it's an early childhood level of morality, which is you want to just take things and destroy things, whatever, but not.
And of course, this seasteading idea is that it's all going to be. Who's going to be able to afford to take part in this and be an investor in this, and who's going to be able to, nobody's going to live there. They're just going to have this. It'll probably be offshore banking. But they're going to be in this lagoon and supposedly autonomous with their own society going on in this little village, and yet they're under they're in this other territory. What happens when the French Polynesians say, well, we don't like what you're doing, and by the way, you're throwing your poop in our beautiful lagoon and poisoning our fish. We'd like you to stop doing that. Well, the libertarians, the wealthy libertarians will say, oh, regulation will be anathema to me.
Well, I'm just realizing, so he put all the libertarians on an island.
Oh, that's that's right, with the lawyers.
But does that mean that they're all going to agree on how to have liberty?
No, it would be a nightmare because, again,
you still have to have some kind of community agreement.
But liberty comes from this idea of our responsibility toward each other, right? I mean, and so it's you could say ironic or sort of perverse. So we have freedom in so much as we actually are giving up our liberty all the time to have a social contract or something like that, right? So our freedom is the fact that we are engaged in giving up our freedom to other people so that we can, have neighbors and not kill each other.
Sharing.
Like sharing. But again, this is all just this really perverse branding because we have a sharing economy. Yeah, right. So I shared that with you, and now you need to give me money.
Words that should never be spoken in the same phrase.
I said it to the Board of Supervisors. I called it an Orwellian grotesque.
The projects they describe, and those the Seasteading Institute currently has it. I had the Brainlines Institute once. And what you put institute behind anything is great.
It's fantastic.
Are suffused with a Silicon Valley ethos, one that values innovation, novelty, efficiency, and independence over the protections traditionally provided by governments and employers. Think of seasteads as the hardware for creating new societies. They treat government as little more than a failed business model. When viewed as an industry, governance is the largest in the world. It's also inefficient. Worse yet, some of the poorest performers kill their own customers. Well, that's need to have a point there. But so that's what these cities and the idea in the end when there are many of these floating cities, all with their own governance, and maybe offshore, they'll come up with a way to do it. I mean, oil rigs are offshore, and they're basically floating with this technology of ballasted posts and things. The idea is that if you don't like the city, the government that you're in, the governance that you're ruled by, you go to another one. You take your little module and you go to the next one and try that one out. So
they all should shoot up a flag that kind of, like their branding,
right?
Well,
there will be flags.
There will be flags.
Then there will be immigration.
If you come to our island, you can shoot guns. If you come to our island, we don't eat meat.
Yeah.
I don't know.
How dare you have a rule like that? I refuse. I'm leaving now.
Eat your pets is an actual political party.
This is my module. I'll do whatever I want. I'll eat my cat.
That's indeed. Oh, the famous chicken cacciatore. That's a story out of Valley Ford, which we won't get into now. But this is Noam Chomsky sort of debunking this American label, this brand libertarian that people go around with. And so good old Noam. So
what does Noam say?
Noam, and should I do a Noam monotone?
No.
Oh, no. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Libertarian in the United States has a meaning which is almost the opposite of what it has in the rest of the world, traditionally. Here, libertarian means ultra-right-wing capitalist. In the European tradition, libertarian means socialist. So anarchism was sometimes called libertarian socialism, a large wing of anarchism. So we have to be a little careful about terminology. In America, a libertarian means extreme advocate of total tyranny, unquote. It means a power ought to be given given into the hands of private, unaccountable tyrannies, even worse than state tyrannies, because in them the public has some kind of role. But I would say where public choice theory comes from, we're not going to get into public choice theory, which is a sort of branch of neoliberalism. It does come from a real critique of state institutions. I'm very critical of the federal government. I don't like the federal government. In fact, I like Republicans who have this natural mistrust of the federal government. It doesn't mean that I'm advocating no government. But the people, like with public choice theory, they said these institutions, these federal institutions, do not function the way they're supposed to. They're supposed to care for people, they don't. They're supposed to educate, they don't. Just the opposite. But their answer was the problem. Their answer was that actually market forces need to govern these things.
Education,
healthcare,
infrastructure,
whatever it is, and so it's their answer that I disagree with, but it's what obtains. We all think of in terms of markets today, and even people that would say I have this running battle in my own mind with our neighbor, Peter Barnes. He knows that neoliberal is a bad word, but it completely informs his ideas about how we should deal with climate change and poverty and all of this stuff. So we're living in that world. We're living, our mind is constrained by this attitude about markets and the economy, et cetera. But it would be wrong to say that Ayn Rand obtains in this culture to this day for a very good reason, is that she is pointing out these things that are wrong. It's just the answer that people make to them, which I find deeply perverse.
The Randian vision of
it's Nietzsche's blonde piece.
If the corporations have free rein to run their business however they would like, but they have no sense that they need to support their employees in a better way.
Not if it costs them, costs money, or if the CEO gets $100,000 less a year. No.
Well, it's all $100,000.
Well,
right?
or
$10 million.
So how do we decide the value of a person?
Well,
right?
the corporation, in essence, like neoliberal thinking, is so extremist that actually they think the really far out ones, maybe all of them, they think that the corporation itself is too socialistic. The idea that you would have a contract, the idea that they would provide you health care or a pension. They don't like that.
They don't want health care.
Yeah, no, they want corporations where everything's, in a sense, freelanced. Right? And
Can we all just
like
quit?
So here's this was an article, I think, in Guernica magazine, and opinion here. Hearing the language and philosophy of tech disruption applied to government, which is what they're all about. They all, technology advances. It should be the paramount thing, not necessarily governance or regulation or anything, as long as you're still inventing stuff, which, could be good. When applied to government, when so many of the amazing technological advances that have fueled recent disruptions have done so at the expense of labor rights and individual privacy, we landlubbers are right to be wary. Government is not simply an albatross around the neck of otherwise free individuals. When it works, it protects the vulnerable and guards the commons, essential tasks at which the free market so often fails. Ocean dwellers will also need these protections. Much as we might like to, we can't escape the political, even by walking into the sea. But so
this is more
maybe
the seasteading people.
Yeah, seasteading. It's all about seasteading. So maybe I'm getting all this wrong. I'm just stating my opinion, of course, and I'm not really learned in these matters.
No.
So if you
please call in.
Please educate us. 415-663-8492. And this is KWMR in Point Reyes Station, 90.5 in Point Reyes Station, 89.9 in Bolinas, 92.3 in San Geronimo Valley, and streaming live on KWMR.org. And support for programming is provided by the California Film Institute, celebrating film and media as art, entertainment, and education at the Christopher B. Smith Raphael Film Center, the Mill Valley Film Festival, and through CFI education programs. Information at cafilm.org. And support is also provided by Coastal Health Alliance, offering comprehensive family medicine and dental services and the only podiatrist in West Marin. With health centers in Point Reyes, Bolinas, and Stinson Beach, Coastal Health welcomes patients with Medicare, Medi-Cal, private insurance including Kaiser, and no insurance. Appointments and general information at 415-663-8666 or at coastalhealth.net. And local programming, also underwritten by West Marin Senior Services, a local nonprofit offering assessment, care management, caregiver referrals, transportation options, and nutrition programs. Accommodations, including respite and short stays, are available at Stockstill House, a home for 8 seniors. Information and volunteer opportunities available at 415-663-8148 or online at wmss.org. Thank you to all our wonderful underwriters and members. Thank you for donating during latest little weekend pledge drive.
415-663-8492. We're talking about libertarianism.
And, of course, Ron Paul. Famous libertarian. And the Libertarian Party put up the candidate. Remember Gary Johnson?
Oh, boy.
Governor Gary Johnson.
More interesting was his running mate, William Weld, also known as Bill, who comes from a very old and very wealthy American family. He's been here for about 400 years, wrecking the place. That is more to the point about libertarianism. It's all these really, really rich people who don't want any restraint on their power. They don't want to be responsible to anyone. And their theory is that a spontaneous order will occur if you just take away all of the rules and structure.
Sure.
Then all of a sudden there'll be this magical thing will happen where everything will be, resolve itself through the function of the market of human lives.
But the fact is that Gary Johnson, who was kind of acted like a bit of a buffoon.
He was an idiot, yeah.
And, he came across as being kind of loopy and uninformed, but he still received 1% of the popular vote, which is 1.2 million votes out there. And if they had 5%, then they would get equal ballot access and federal funding and become the third party. And Ron Paul was very, remember when he was running, he was very popular.
For a great reason. He's one person. Bernie wouldn't say this. Certainly a super hawk like Hillary would never say this. He said we have 900 military bases all over the world and we should close them down. We should stop these foreign wars and blah, blah, blah. So in that sense, if you're thinking about foreign policy, vote for Ron Paul or Rand, his son Rand Paul. They're the only people staking that position politically. They're saying end the foreign wars, remove these foreign military bases. And in that sense, they're absolutely right. And like Bernie had nothing to say about war. And obviously Hillary's very pro-war. And
foreign intervention.
Intervention. Right? That means we blow up your country.
Because we need the resources that you have to keep our country going, or whatever.
So in that way, I agree with Ron Paul. He was right.
Yeah. Well, there was always things to agree with.
Yes.
Based on researchers defining libertarian views as fiscally conservative and socially liberal and against government intervention in economic affairs and for expansion of personal freedom. So they did a poll. 17 to voters who are libertarian on the political spectrum range from 17 to 23% of the U.S. electorate. However, a 2014 Pew poll found that 23% of Americans who identify as libertarians had no idea what the word means.
Yes.
And
there you go. Well, these are all just brands. I mean, that's the thing that's thrown around. All these words have been denuded of their meaning. It's hard to bring up the nudist again.
It's got liberty in it, though.
It's got to be good.
So would libertarians want to get rid of, the police force?
I suppose in theory they would, wouldn't they? Which is a catastrophe.
About the justice system, the whole...
How do they answer that question? How far do you go? I mean, that's kind of anarchism.
Or are they wanting to privatize these kind of services as opposed to government run?
Right. I mean, this is in a sense what the West was for a time. There's a story that comes out of Tamaulipas many decades ago, a century ago, where two farmers, one had a pig that kept getting into the other neighbor's vegetables. And so they've, had this dispute, keep your pig out of my garden. Fair point. Pig will eat all your delicious radishes.
Right.
But it might give its flesh a wonderful spicy something. Anyway, so the pig breaks in again. The other neighbor shoots and kills the owner of the pig.
The owner of the pig?
Oh, right, because he kept saying, keep your pig out of my garden. Probably killed the pig, too. Who knows? Or maybe they became friends. But so justice at that time, say 100 years ago, maybe more like 140 years ago in Westmoreland, was all of the farmer neighbors got together and they debated amongst themselves whether or not it was justified. And they said, well, he did tell him to keep the pig out of there many, many times. And so there were two outcomes. One, he was either justified and so he could go free, or two, he was not, and they were going to hang him. And they decided that was justified, that he killed the guy who owned the pig. And so he went free. And if they had decided the other way, then he would have been hanged.
Wow.
When
was this?
This maybe 140 years ago, probably the 1870s.
Frontier justice, Frontier
justice.
Or community policing. It's taken care of by the people themselves.
Dewey Livingston,
Not a bad thing.
Call in 663-8492. Is that story true? I mean, let's make up some stories about Inverness in the 1870s.
Well, I was just up in Oregon in Modoc County for the eclipse, and I went back to Surprise Valley, where I lived for 2 years. And
surprise!
And there was a story there of, and this was in the 70s, I think, or the 80s. There was a woman who worked for the county, who lived in Surprise Valley and was working at the hospital there. There's a little hospital. And she was being stalked by another county guy. And she told the sheriff about it, and the sheriff said, "Oh, don't worry about it. I'll figure this out." And he had the guy transferred. They just worked it out within the county. He goes to the county office and said, "We've got a little problem here. We just need to move him out of town." Is that all right? So they did. They put him down the other end of Modoc County to harass people, probably in Susanville.
Oh, Doyle City. Well, I mean, there are other sorts of village
frontier justice.
Frontier justice is terrifying. Do you remember
everybody? You know how to fix things.
Who was the black guy that the locals in Bolinas, peaceful, lovely Bolinas, beat within an inch of his life about 10 years ago?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So there you go. There's another bit of
the kids did that.
The kids did. Yeah, the lovely children of Westmoreland.
Come now.
Yeah.
So here's an example. The headline reads, "Inside the total catastrophe that ensued after an elected Libertarian mayor promised the freest little city in Texas."
Okay, let's hear it.
So the town is called Von Ormy, a lovely name, not just a pretty name. They thought they were going to be taken over by the expansion of San Antonio, just the urban sprawl taking them over, and they didn't want that. So they actually got together and decided they were going to incorporate. It was unincorporated. They decided to incorporate as a city. And the guy who pushed this was became the mayor, and his idea was to, as a libertarian, not to start out with taxes, with property taxes, and then gradually bring them down to zero, because taxing property is wrong under the libertarian things, because, your property is your property, and why should the government take a piece of that? He said they were going to attract new business, but it turns out they lacked a sewer system. This is very similar to Point Reyes Station, which lacks a sewer system, and they had a hard time attracting anybody, except, of course, oil drillers. There was an oil boom in the shale beds nearby. So for a little while, everything looked sort of good. And then the oil went away, oil prices went down, all those guys left. And by that time, they'd already eliminated property tax in 2015. So all they had coming in was about $200,000 in sales taxes that they levied themselves. They had 3 police officers. They couldn't afford to pay them anymore. They had 3 patrol cars. Everything fell apart because of squabbling between the 5 city commissioners. They didn't hire policemen who knew what they were doing. They were all rookies, so nobody knew what they were supposed to be doing. The fire department couldn't get paid. So now there's this city in Texas that is probably going to be a ghost town and will be swallowed by San Antonio in some time. But it was all based on this libertarian thing that you don't tax property because property is inviolate, and why should you have to pay the government for your property? And they were going to rely on sales taxes, which then diminished because it's not a constant source.
Oh, and there's no sewer system and all these things. I just think it's that balance. You need the balance because it's a misconception, which I will not get into because Paul is threatening me with violence. Please call in to stop his attacks.
Do call in 415-663-8492, and please keep the language clean. If you wish to swear at us, do it in a nice way.
Yes,
because if we may be mistaken in our opinions about the whole libertarian thing.
But the Western democracy does not come out of Athens. Athenian democracy is totally different than where our democracies came from. They came from medieval Germany, and that's a thing I'm not going to get into. But privacy and private property are very important things in our lives. People cannot I can't go to Shelley's house. Shelley has to invite me in. And this is your space and nobody else's space, and you have control over it. And we believe in this kind of privacy, and I wouldn't argue with that. I think it makes sense. That's why communes don't work really in the West, because they all fall apart because they don't allow people that personal space. But I would say there are all this other category of things that should be cooperative activities that Paul and Shelley and Charles should work together on, like having a septic system, having a water system.
Right.
Where does the electricity come from? Where does the food come from? These questions
Things
are collective.
That support the common good.
That's right. So these are collective questions, but we have to have an imbalance. People do need their privacy, and we wouldn't want to live in a world in which that didn't exist. And I think that's very much the mistake on the left. You call the left, which is trying to correct the way people think. I understand why people say things like nanny state and PC gone mad and
Sure.
politically correctness and all this stuff, and why they're angry about it, because you have to. It's not illegal to be a bigot, I guess is what I'm saying. And nor should it be. You should
Not if that's what you want to be.
Well, I think you should be. It is not illegal, nor should it be illegal. You shouldn't tell people how to think.
And we have a caller on the line. Hello, caller. What's your name? And please, what's your language? Hello.
Well,
hello.
Maybe I'll speak Danish.
Oh, Danish.
Well, let's have it. Yeah.
That's a good language.
This is Fred Polander calling from Biggerud, Denmark.
Good heavens.
Our whole Denmark listenership is
just increased by 100%.
Exactly.
I think I'm the only one in the country listening to you guys.
That's not true. I know many Danes that listen to this show every week. Sorry.
Yeah, right.
Mr. Calander.
Proposal.
Yeah.
I want to nix my idea of seceding from the United States and making the Kingdom of Raphaelia.
I think it's
I want
Schultzlandia.
it to be Libertaria.
Libertarians.
We'll have anarchy, but we won't have any guns.
Okay. No guns. Well, I don't know. That sounds like a rule we can't live with.
Yeah, knives
We
like
have to
a drunken
do
Finn.
that because when the U.S. government invades us with all their guns and weapons, we have to have all our guns locked up so that we are on the side of the news media. So they can't do anything to us, see?
No, I see.
See.
Yeah.
It's a good plan.
And definitely the toll booth. The toll is going up,
Toll booths, yes, a tax to drive on Highway 1 through Marshall, through Raphaelia.
Nobody can come into West Marin for less than $10 a car.
You could actually do that. If West Marin Incorporated, it would have the power to put toll booths on county roads. You couldn't do it on state
not
roads.
on Highway 1. Yeah.
But every tributary that leads to one, you could put a toll booth
We're
on.
in California anymore.
I'm sorry, Fred, could you repeat that?
We're not going to be part of California anymore. We don't have any state roads anymore. We're not going to have any rumble strips.
Rumble
strips is $4 million.
So is this the drunken orgy party, basically? Because I'm interested,
hey, Charles.
at least in the drunken part.
Hey, I have had a lot more wine than you have already.
Oh, dear.
Well, that's a first.
It's 8:46 p.m. here.
Different time zone.
Yes. Well, so do you have libertarian leanings then, Fred?
I absolutely do, but I'm not sure if I'm an anarchist or a fascist.
Uh-huh.
Oh.
Gracious.
I mean, if we put you into power, Paul, I mean, that's kind of fascism, isn't it?
No, that would be royalty. It would be the
monarchism.
Monarchism. Yes, exactly. I'd be the ultimate
benevolent dictator, though.
Benevolent dictator, and if
doubt it.
The idea would be that if I did anything wrong and enough people thought it was wrong, then I would be
you would lose
assassinated, and someone else would come. Yeah, it's a very simple system we're going to have.
The mandate of heaven, as Confucius would have said. You've lost the mandate of heaven. No, I should be in charge, and my reign of terror is going to be exquisite.
You're too far north. Sorry.
Well, exclusive North Marshal is going to cut itself off from all of this Raffelian nonsense. We will not be oppressed any longer.
So, Fred, regulations, rules and regulations are anathema to progress? Hello?
I would say yes.
Uh-huh.
I think that the government is fine to keep the people off the streets, but, they shouldn't have any power.
Okay.
I think there's an interesting thing about many places in Europe. It's not illegal to drink in public, and I think it profoundly undermines police authority. So if I could create one rule, it would be everyone should be allowed to drink in public because the drunks just sort of laugh at the police there as they come around.
How about
I was just in Spain recently. I was in Spain, and the police there prefer to drink together.
Oh, the police are drunk too.
They like to have their alcohol.
I see.
Fair enough. Drunken police.
And social welfare. How about welfare and family support?
Education.
Robots doing all the work, and we're going to have artificial intelligence. Everybody would have a guaranteed salary of $200,000 a year. That would promote the consumer society.
Excellent.
Pro-degradation. Consume now.
Are you with me?
That's very. We make no judgment whatsoever. We're open to all things here.
Even people living under the freeways in Berkeley and San Francisco.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
homeless people get their $200,000 a year too.
And
then they wouldn't be homeless anymore, would they?
That's right.
Or just homes would cost $20 million instead of $2. But
no, you don't. See, that's all a fantasy. You can build a bamboo house for $10,000 if you put your own labor into it.
Sure.
Well,
it's all just government subsidizing the construction industry.
Well, I mean, to bring it back to Patrick Friedman, Milton Friedman's little, I probably can't say any of the words. Yeah, that's okay. That's the word I'm going to use then. Grandchild, he had a career before Seasteading as a, quote, pick-up artist. And he had a whole website dedicated to how to be a pickup artist. What that means, apparently, is how men manipulate women into wanting to be in relationships with them or have sex with them or something like that. I mean, it's really horrific. But the funny thing, so there was a guy who wrote these books. Somebody showed me an article ages ago about different countries in the world and how you manipulate women in that particular country in order to...
Oh, wow. Guidebook.
It was. I forget what it was called. But they went to Denmark, and it just didn't work because and I think it has something to do with how socialism or socialized social democracy, I guess you'd say, works in Denmark, that women aren't insecure.
No.
They sort of pick, whoever they want to sleep with, and they're not, you can't manipulate them into sleeping with you. Have you been manipulating Danes into sleeping with you again, Mr. Calander? Tell the truth. This is KWMR, Judgment Radio.
I read something about somebody here in Denmark that said Danish women are scary.
Scary. Well, that would be scary for the likes of Patrick Friedman.
I heard on the radio has this really squeaky voice. Patrick Friedman. I was like,
can you imagine being on a floating island with
artist?
him? The squeaky voice guy. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, he's a strange cat. But it's embarrassing. But it was interesting.
Danish women don't take any shit.
Oh,
hey!
I didn't hear that.
A new toaster
Sorry,
oven.
Fred.
Danish women don't take any feces.
Okay.
Well, that's why I don't go there. I have exotic tastes.
The Latin version sounds better, right? Feces.
Now I've got to do paperwork. Thank you, Fred.
And you are listening to KWMR.
Look, I'm getting roaming charges for this.
Yes. Well, we really do appreciate the call, Fred. Thank you very much. That's great.
Thank you, Fred. For once, it wasn't me here on KWMR.
Cheers.
I think if you take away people's, if people feel secure, right, then they're not open to that kind of manipulation. And again, I think that there's a real connection why Patrick Friedman is a libertarian, blah, 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 and how he would like to manipulate, women or use them or dominate them, whatever.
Well, and that's really the whole free market structure is about manipulation and fear, causing people to, need various things because of some horrible outcome.
Well, there's a simpler phrase:
needing their products and creating monopolies in creating those products, so that there's only a handful of companies.
Or needing, the military, because otherwise ISIS.
Well, I mean, people who in debt are slaves to their employers. I mean, I think that's what's really going on. And so I understand people that do not want to have their time and their lives controlled in such a way and don't want to be in debt and don't want to all of these things. So we do accept a lot of tyranny over our time and our lives as normal. And I wish people would just be upset about it. But I think that because people don't feel they can do anything about it, that's just nature. This idea of being in debt, this idea of working for a wage slavery. That they come up with the rationalizations for it. They tell you they love their job. Well, they have no alternative. They have no alternative. They say, oh, you must send your children to a school because they need socialization. They cannot do anything but what they're doing. But rather than say, oh, I'm a monster for giving my children to strangers, or, oh, actually, I don't really like doing this work, but I can't afford
schools now. Wait, this is very libertarian.
Not the schools that we have. I agree with it. I agree with in like I said, I like Republicans because they have a basic mistrust of the government. They might be complete fools in all other ways, but in that one way, they are.
And yet, like every other politician, all they want to do is govern.
I would say they have no answers.
But it's about lowering taxes is basically what they end up doing.
I guess
lowering taxes on the ultra rich.
It's hideous. No, I agree with you. It's hideous.
Because they made all their money off of all these people who work for them.
Sure. Yeah.
But they don't want to have to take care of them.
There is an end game for this. At the end of the Roman Empire, about 7 families owned North Africa, and they were so powerful that they just told Rome, we're not paying taxes anymore. And so what happened was, they defunded the military, so the Goths just came in and killed them all and took their stuff. So, I mean, it's not rational. It's crazy. And it causes all these crazy outcomes that will harm all those people that advocate it, even the very wealthy. And so, I think they're fools. I think they're demented. But you'd have to have on the local level a will and a desire to do something different. And we simply don't have it. I mean, there are people who go to one public meeting and I kind of like, oh, I'm just exhausted after that. I was like, hey, just to get a septic system, people had to go to meetings once a week for 2 years. So there isn't people like the nanny state. They like being taken care of. They like patriarchy. They like daddy being in charge and them not having to think about it. So we're in a suspended state of childhood in this country because we on this level aren't willing to get into those questions and deal with them. So we can sneer, at the libertarians, but, we have these problems too. We need to do something about. I don't see the will to actually do them. Certainly not in a place like this. But hope springs infernal, I think is what they say.
Anyway. Well,
this is Let's Talk.
It's Let's Talk. We have a couple more minutes if you'd like to call in and keep your language clean. That would be wonderful.
Filthy Danes.
And if you're... Yes, that would be nice. So, libertarianism, there are always reasons behind new political ideas or different political ideas. We were just talking about some of them, that there is this overweening power in certain parts of government, and they're not doing what voters really want them to do. People are feeling helpless under the system that we have that isn't really a democracy so much as it's becoming more of a plutocracy, back to the old robber baron days, but more organized now and not as clear. They're not smoking big fat cigars and top hats, but like Monopoly. And so coming up with ideas like libertarianism is understandable. It's another way of governing, except that the American version of it tends to be more of the same, except without any regulations, and you can do whatever you want to do, which is
power without responsibility.
Yeah, power without responsibility.
I think that's it, and it's unfortunate, but again, we're content with it. I mean, we're content with the tyrannies that we have now, and we just live in our little special place, and we're special people. But we're totally dialed into that economy. We live as beneficiaries of it. We live at the top of this empire rather than at the bottom. So, I guess the libertarian does raise interesting questions. I would just say their motivations, or certainly the solutions they propose, tend to be odious. They tend to be awful. But the idea of having this negative reaction to the way, like Ron Paul saying, we need to end these foreign wars and we need to close these military bases. Now, he may be saying that because he doesn't want to pay the taxes, right? Yeah. His motivation may be terrible for doing that. It may not be because he loves peace. It may be because he's annoyed by his tax bill. But he's right. And I think we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Some of these people, they're reacting against something that's real. Their other ideas might be awful. But I mean, that's why Trump got elected, right?
If they actually field a worthy candidate next time, who knows if the Libertarian Party won't get more.
Gary Johnson was, in a way...
That was self-destructive right there. But if they'd fielded somebody who was actually electable, who knows? They might have gotten a bigger chunk. They might be the third party right now.
Well, Bill Weld, famously, Gary Johnson's running mate, the Libertarian ticket in 2016, he was famously pro-choice, right? And he spoke at the 92 Republican convention because he's a Republican. He was the Republican mayor or governor of Massachusetts. And he said, I'm for a woman's right to choose. And everybody boos him at the Republican convention in 92 for saying that. And his political career got sidelined basically because, Bill Clinton sort of, anyway, too long a story. But to me, when somebody like Bill Weld, this Boston Brahmin character, although born in New York State, he says, I'm for a woman's right to choose. What I hear is, it's like, I don't want the complications of any bastard children, or we need to control the population of these poor brown people, so we should definitely promote this. I don't hear somebody who actually is saying that
I care about women.
I care about women. But you could say, well, I agree with his position on that. His motivation for it, I suspect. Unknowable what motivates people to do what they do. You can guess, and I would guess in Bill's case,
if the outcome is what people are hoping for, what are the motives? Well, what are Patrick Friedman's motives for having captive women on his floating islands? I don't know. Anyway, this has been Let's talk.
Let's do it, Paul. It's a good idea. He's right. Patrick Friedman is right. We're doing it.
I want to thank all our listeners today and our caller. Oh, boy. Fred, thank you, Fred, for calling in. Really, it was very interesting.
So his house is open. We can get some wine.
Exactly.
Excellent idea. Do that on the way home.
I hope you'll tune in every Thursday at 11 because your voice really does matter, especially to this show because, that's what we're about. KWMR does not take a stand on any of the issues discussed on Let's Talk. Opinions expressed on this program are those of the hosts and callers and don't necessarily reflect the views of KWMR, its board of directors, underwriters, or members. And we'll be back next Thursday with some topic. Who knows? Thank you, Shelley. Thank you, Charles.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Paul. Fred. And see you next week.